The stranger rode into Salvation Creek on a Tuesday morning in June of 1878, and before his horse had even stopped at the hitching post, 3 mothers had already pulled their children inside, and 2 shopkeepers had locked their doors. His name was Cole Hartley, and the reputation that preceded him was darker than the shadow his wide-brimmed hat cast across the dusty street. He dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who had spent more years in the saddle than on solid ground, his boots hitting the packed earth with a finality that seemed to announce trouble. Cole was 26 years old, tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by hard work and harder living. His jaw was perpetually set in a line that suggested he had forgotten how to smile, and his eyes, a pale gray like winter ice, held the kind of emptiness that came from seeing too much death too young. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a memento from a knife fight in Dodge City that had left the other man in the ground. The people of Salvation Creek knew his name because wanted posters bearing his likeness had circulated through Kansas and into Missouri 3 years prior. Cole Hartley, wanted for armed robbery, cattle rustling, and association with the Brennan Gang, one of the most notorious outfits to terrorize the territories. Though he had never killed a man who did not draw on him first, the law did not make such distinctions, and neither did the townsfolk who whispered behind their hands as he walked past. Cole paid them no mind as he strode toward the saloon, his spurs clinking with each step. He had learned long ago that people would think what they wanted, and no amount of explanation would change minds already made up. The weight of their judgment sat on his shoulders like an old coat, familiar and uncomfortable in equal measure. Inside the saloon, the bartender, a nervous man named Pete with thinning hair and perpetually sweating palms, served him whiskey with trembling hands. Cole drank it in silence, aware of the way conversations had died when he entered and how the other patrons gave him a wide berth. He had come to Salvation Creek because he heard the sheriff was old and nearly blind, and the town was small enough that a man could disappear if he kept his head down. 3 years of running had worn him down to the bone, and he was tired of sleeping with one eye open and his gun under his pillow. What Cole did not know was that Salvation Creek, despite its small size, had something most towns lacked. A schoolteacher named Eleanor Brennan who believed in second chances the way most people believed in Sunday service. Eleanor was 23 years old and had arrived in Salvation Creek 2 years earlier from Boston, bringing with her a trunk full of books, a teaching certificate from a women's college, and an optimism that her mother insisted would be beaten out of her by the harsh realities of frontier life. She had proven her mother wrong on most accounts, establishing a schoolhouse that served 23 children ranging from ages 6 to 14, and earning the respect of even the most skeptical ranchers who had initially balked at the idea of a woman from the East teaching their children. She was not conventionally beautiful in the way of the dance hall girls who worked at the saloon with their painted faces and low-cut dresses. Eleanor was slender and of average height, with chestnut hair she wore in a practical bun at the nape of her neck, and brown eyes that held an intelligence and warmth that made people feel truly seen when she looked at them. Her dresses were simple and modest, usually in shades of blue or gray, and her hands bore the calluses of a woman who was not afraid of hard work. Eleanor first saw Cole Hartley on Wednesday afternoon as she was walking her students home from school. She had heard the whispers, of course. In a town of barely 300 souls, news traveled faster than wildfire, and by Tuesday evening, everyone knew that the infamous Cole Hartley had taken a room above the saloon and seemed to be settling in. He was standing outside the general store, and Eleanor noticed him because of the way he held himself, apart from everyone else, as if an invisible barrier separated him from the rest of humanity. She watched as Mrs. Henderson, one of her students' mothers, crossed the street to avoid walking past him, pulling her daughter along with an urgency that bordered on panic. Cole's expression did not change, but Eleanor saw something flicker in his eyes, something that looked almost like resignation. That evening, as Eleanor sat in her small room behind the schoolhouse grading papers by lamplight, she could not stop thinking about that look. She had seen it before in the eyes of students who had been labeled as troublemakers, who had been told so many times that they were bad that they had simply stopped trying to be good. The thought troubled her through the night and into the next day. On Thursday, Eleanor did something that would have shocked her proper Boston family and scandalized most of Salvation Creek. She walked into the saloon. The piano player stopped mid-song. Pete the bartender dropped the glass he was cleaning, and it shattered on the floor behind the bar. The 3 cowboys playing poker froze with their cards in their hands. and Cole Hartley, sitting alone at a corner table with a half-empty bottle of whiskey, looked up with those ice-gray eyes and met her gaze directly. Eleanor felt her heart hammer against her ribs, but she kept her chin up and her step steady as she crossed the sawdust-covered floor. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she had expected, and that the hardness of his expression was a mask that did not quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Hartley," she said, her voice clear and steady despite the way everyone in the saloon was staring at her. "My name is Eleanor Brennan. I teach at the schoolhouse, and I was wondering if you might be willing to help me with something." Cole stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Lady, you got the wrong man," he said finally, his voice rough from disuse and whiskey. "I do not help people." "I think you might be exactly the right man," Eleanor replied, and before he could protest further, she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, folding her hands on the table in front of her. "You see, we have been having trouble with some wild horses that keep breaking through the school's fence and trampling the garden the children planted. I need someone who is good with horses to help me reinforce the fence and perhaps gentle one or two of the horses so they can be used for the older students to learn to ride properly." It was partially true. The fence had been damaged, though not by wild horses but by a windstorm 2 weeks prior. And while Eleanor did think teaching the students to ride would be valuable, that was not the real reason she was sitting across from Cole Hartley, and they both knew it. "Why me?" Cole asked, leaning back in his chair and studying her with an intensity that would have made most women uncomfortable. "This town has plenty of men who know their way around horses." "Because those men are busy with their own ranches and farms," Eleanor said smoothly. "And because I am told you are one of the best horsemen to ever ride through these territories. That is what they say about you, is it not? That you could ride anything with 4 legs and gentle the wildest Mustang." Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. "They say a lot of things about me. Most of them are not so flattering." "I am not interested in most things," Eleanor said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I am interested in whether you can help my students. I can pay you, not much, but enough for meals and to contribute to your room and board." The silence stretched between them, and Eleanor became acutely aware of how close she was sitting to a man the entire town feared, how foolish her mother would say she was being. But beneath the hard edges and the reputation, she saw something else. A man who was surprised that anyone would ask him for help, who was weighing her offer not in terms of money, but in terms of something else entirely. "All right," Cole said finally, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they surprised everyone else in the saloon. "I will take a look at your fence." Eleanor felt a smile bloom across her face, genuine and warm. "Thank you, Mr. Hartley. Shall we say tomorrow morning, around 8 o'clock? "Cole," he said gruffly, "if I am working for you, you can call me Cole." "Then you must call me Eleanor," she replied, rising from her chair with a grace that belied how nervous she actually was. As she walked out of the saloon, she could feel every eye following her, and she knew that by nightfall, the entire town would be talking about the schoolteacher who had walked into the lion's den and walked back out unscathed. What Eleanor did not see was the way Cole watched her go, something like wonder crossing his face before he caught himself and took another drink of whiskey, trying to drown the unfamiliar feeling rising in his chest. The next morning dawned clear and warm, with the kind of golden light that made everything look softer around the edges. Cole arrived at the schoolhouse at 8 o'clock sharp, leading his horse and carrying a toolbox he had borrowed from the livery stable. Eleanor was already there, wearing a simple brown dress with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows and her hair tied back with a practical ribbon. "Good morning," she called out cheerfully, and Cole found himself nodding in response, unsure how to match her brightness. The fence was indeed in poor shape, several posts leaning at angles and boards missing or cracked. Cole set to work without much conversation, his movements efficient and practiced. Eleanor worked alongside him, holding posts steady while he hammered them into place and handing him tools before he asked for them. She did not seem afraid of hard work or of getting her hands dirty, and Cole found that he appreciated that. As the morning wore on and the sun climbed higher in the sky, Eleanor began to talk. She told him about her students, about how young Tommy Patterson was struggling with his reading, but had a gift for mathematics, about how Sarah Chen, whose father ran the laundry, could draw pictures that looked so real you would swear they might walk off the page. She talked about Boston and how different it was from Salvation Creek, about the books she had read and the places she hoped to see someday. Cole did not say much in return, but he listened. He had forgotten what it was like to have someone talk to him as if he were a normal person, as if his past did not define his present. Eleanor did not ask him about the wanted posters, or the Brennan gang, or any of the stories that circulated about him. She simply talked, filling the space between them with words that were like cool water after years in the desert. By noon, they had repaired most of the fence, and Eleanor brought out a basket she had packed with sandwiches, apples, and a jar of lemonade. They sat in the shade of the schoolhouse, and Cole ate slowly, savoring food that someone had prepared with care rather than whatever he could cook over a campfire or buy from a saloon. "You are good at this," Eleanor said, gesturing to the fence. "Building things, I mean. Have you ever thought about doing it as a trade?" Cole shrugged, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Never stayed in one place long enough to build anything permanent." "Maybe you could start," Eleanor suggested gently. "Salvation Creek could use a good carpenter. Mr. Wilson is getting too old to take on all the work himself." "And you think people would hire me?" Cole asked, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. "The women cross the street to avoid me, Eleanor. Children run when they see me coming. What makes you think anyone would trust me to build something for them?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, her brown eyes thoughtful. "I think people are afraid because they do not know you. They know the stories, the reputation, but they do not know Cole Hartley the man. Perhaps if they saw you differently, they would treat you differently." "And how do you propose to change their minds?" Cole asked, genuinely curious now. "By showing them who you really are," Eleanor said simply. "By giving them a chance to see past the stories to the person underneath. It starts with one person believing in you, and then another, and another after that. Change happens slowly, but it happens." Cole looked at her, this woman who barely knew him but spoke with such conviction about his capacity for change. "Why do you care?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "You do not know me. You do not know what I have done." "I know what I see," Eleanor replied, holding his gaze. "I see a man who showed up on time, who did good work, who listened when I talked about my students. I see someone who could be more than what people expect him to be. Is that not worth caring about?" Cole had no answer for that. He finished his sandwich in silence, but something had shifted in the air between them, something he could not quite name, but felt as surely as the sun on his back. Over the following weeks, Cole continued to work at the schoolhouse. He finished the fence, built new shelves for Eleanor's books, and repaired the roof where it had started to leak. He arrived every morning at 8 and worked until late afternoon, and gradually, his presence became less shocking to the townsfolk who passed by. The children were the first to adjust. They were curious by nature, and Eleanor's obvious comfort around Cole made them braver. First, it was just watching him from a distance. Then Tommy Patterson asked him a question about how to hammer a nail properly. Then Sarah Chen showed him one of her drawings, a picture of a horse that made Cole's chest tighten with an emotion he had not felt in years. "That is real good," he told her, his voice gruff but sincere. "You have got talent." Sarah beamed at him, and from that day forward, she always made a point to say good morning when she saw him. Eleanor watched these small interactions with a quiet satisfaction. She saw how Cole softened around the children, how he was patient when they asked him questions, how he once helped a little boy named James who had fallen and scraped his knee, cleaning the wound with a gentleness that contradicted everything the town said about him. But it was not just the children who were changing their opinions. Mrs. Patterson, Tommy's mother, watched Cole help her son and saw not a dangerous outlaw, but a patient teacher. When her porch steps collapsed the following week, she hesitantly approached Cole and asked if he would fix them. He agreed, charging her half of what Mr. Wilson would have, and did such good work that she told her friends about it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Cole's reputation began to shift. He was still met with wariness by some, with outright hostility by others, but there were cracks forming in the wall of fear that had surrounded him since his arrival. Through it all, Eleanor remained a steady presence. She brought him lunch every day, and they would sit together and talk. Cole found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, about growing up with a father who drank away every penny and beat him when the whiskey made him mean, about running away at 14 and falling in with the wrong crowd because they were the only people who offered him food and a place to sleep. He told her about the Brennan gang, about how he had ridden with them for 2 years, before realizing that the path they were on led only to death or prison. "I left them," he said one afternoon as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree, watching clouds drift across the endless blue sky. 3 years ago, I just rode away one night and did not look back. But the wanted posters were already out there, and the law does not care that I stopped. Far as they are concerned, I am still guilty." Eleanor listened without judgment, her hands folded in her lap. "Have you thought about turning yourself in, explaining what happened?" Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The law does not want explanations. They want convictions. I would hang, or at best, spend 20 years in prison. Either way, my life would be over." "So you run," Eleanor said softly. "So I run," Cole agreed. "Or I did until I came here. I am tired, Eleanor. Tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of being alone." Eleanor reached out then and placed her hand over his. Her palm was small and warm, and Cole stared at it as if he had never seen such a thing before. "You are not alone anymore," she said quietly. "You have friends here now. You have me." Cole looked up and met her eyes, and what he saw there made his breath catch in his throat. It was not pity or fear or judgment. It was something softer, something that looked almost like affection, and it terrified him more than any gun ever had. "Eleanor," he started, but she squeezed his hand gently and shook her head. "You do not have to say anything," she said. "I just wanted you to know. You are not the man this town thought you were. You are better than that. You have always been better than that." Cole wanted to believe her. For the first time in his life, he desperately wanted to believe that he could be the man she saw when she looked at him. As summer deepened into August, Cole and Eleanor's friendship deepened into something neither of them had anticipated, but both had begun to hope for. Cole found himself looking forward to their lunches together, to the sound of her laugh when he said something that amused her, to the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Eleanor found herself watching for him in the mornings, feeling a warmth in her chest when she saw him riding up the road, noticing details about him that she had no business noticing. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the rare smile that softened his entire face, the strength in his hands when he lifted heavy beams. The town noticed, too. There was talk, of course, whispers about the schoolteacher and the outlaw, speculation about what exactly was happening between them. Some of it was unkind, but much of it was curious, and a few of the older women who remembered what it was like to be young and in love watched with knowing smiles. Everything changed on a Thursday in late August when 3 men rode into Salvation Creek. They wore dusters despite the heat, and their horses were lathered with sweat as if they had been ridden hard. Cole was at the schoolhouse helping Eleanor organize supplies for the new school year that would start in September when he heard the horses outside. He looked through the window and felt his blood turn to ice. He recognized the lead rider immediately, Jack Brennan, leader of the gang that bore his name, and the man Cole had once called friend. "Get the children inside," Cole said to Eleanor, his voice sharp and urgent. "Now!" Eleanor heard the fear in his voice and did not question him. She quickly ushered the few children who were playing outside into the schoolhouse, her heart pounding. "What is wrong?" she asked as she locked the door. "My past just caught up with me," Cole said grimly, checking his gun. He had not worn it in weeks, had started to feel like maybe he did not need it anymore. But he had strapped it on that morning for reasons he could not explain. Now he was grateful for the instinct. Jack Brennan dismounted in the middle of the street, his 2 companions flanking him. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and mean-eyed, with a scar that ran from his ear to his mouth, courtesy of a Mexican bandit who had not lived to regret giving it to him. "Cole Hartley," Jack called out, his voice carrying across the dusty street. "I know you are in there. Come on out and let us talk like old friends." Cole stepped out of the schoolhouse, positioning himself between the door and the 3 men. His hand rested on his gun, but he did not draw it. Not yet. "We are not friends, Jack. Have not been for 3 years. Jack grinned, showing teeth stained yellow from tobacco. "Now, that hurts my feelings, Cole. After all we've been through together, you are just going to pretend we are strangers?" "What do you want?" Cole asked, his voice flat. "We need a 4th man for a job," Jack said, walking closer with a confidence that came from having 2 armed men at his back. "Bank in Missouri, easy pickings. Thought of you first because you always were the best with horses. We need someone who can get us out fast when things go sideways." "I am done with that life," Cole said. "Find someone else." Jack's expression hardened. "See, that is not how this works. You rode with us, Cole. You know things. You know how we operate, who our contacts are. You do not get to just walk away and pretend none of that matters. I left 3 years ago, Cole reminded him. I have kept my mouth shut, have not caused you any trouble. That should be enough. It would be, Jack agreed. Except now, I hear you have gone soft. Here you have been playing house with some schoolteacher, doing odd jobs like you are a regular citizen. That makes me nervous. Cole, makes me think maybe you might decide to buy yourself some goodwill with the law by telling them things they want to know. I would never do that, Cole said, and he meant it. Whatever else he was not a traitor. Jack studied him for a long moment. Then his gaze shifted to the schoolhouse behind Cole. That her? The schoolteacher? Cole's jaw tightened. Leave her out of this. Pretty thing, Jack continued as if Cole had not spoken. Be a shame if something happened to her, or to those kids she teaches. Accidents happen all the time out here on the frontier. Houses catch fire, people get trampled by horses, stagecoaches tip over. The threat hung in the air between them, as clear and sharp as a knife blade. Cole felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce, but he kept his voice level. You touch her or anyone in this town, and I will kill you myself. Jack laughed. There is the Cole I remember. See, that fire is still in you. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to ride with us tomorrow morning. We do this job, you get your cut, and then we part ways again. You do that, and your pretty school teacher stays safe. You refuse, and, well, I cannot make any promises about what might happen. Cole wanted to draw his gun right then and there, wanted to end this threat permanently. But Jack had 2 men with him, both with their hands on their weapons, and any shooting would put Eleanor and the children at risk. He was trapped, and Jack knew it. I need to think about it, Cole said. You got until sunrise tomorrow, Jack replied. We will be camped at Miller's Creek. You come alone, and you come ready to ride. Otherwise, we will come back here, and next time, we will not be so polite. The 3 men mounted up and rode out of town, leaving a trail of dust and dread in their wake. Cole stood in the street long after they had disappeared, his fists clenched at his sides. Eleanor emerged from the schoolhouse, her face pale but composed. The children were still inside, and she had left Mrs. Patterson's oldest daughter in charge of keeping them calm. Who were they? She asked, though she already knew the answer. The Brennan gang, Cole said heavily. They want me to ride with them again, rob a bank over in Missouri. You said no, Eleanor said. It was not a question. I said I would think about it, Cole admitted. They threatened you, Eleanor, threatened the children. If I refuse, they will come back and hurt people to get at me. Eleanor stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used. Then we go to the sheriff, she said firmly. We tell him what is happening, and we get help. Cole shook his head. Sheriff Dalton is 70 years old and half blind. He could not stop Jack and his men if he tried. All it would do is get more people hurt. So, what are you saying? Eleanor asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes, and it made her chest feel like something was crushing it. I am saying maybe I should leave, Cole said quietly. If I am not here, they have no reason to come back. You and the town would be safe. And you would be on the run again, Eleanor said, her voice rising with emotion. For the rest of your life, looking over your shoulder, alone. Is that what you want? What I want does not matter, Cole shot back, his frustration boiling over. Don't you understand? I am poison, Eleanor. Everything I touch gets ruined. I should have never stayed here, should have never let myself believe I could be anything other than what I am. And what are you? Eleanor demanded, stepping even closer so she had to tilt her head back to look at him. Tell me, Cole, what are you? I am an outlaw, he said bitterly. A wanted man, someone who will always be running from his past. No, Eleanor said fiercely. You are a man who made mistakes but is trying to do better. You are someone who is kind to children, who works hard, who has friends in this town, whether you realize it or not. You are the man She stopped, catching herself, but the words hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. Cole stared at her, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Eleanor, do not care about me. I am no good for you. Too late, she said simply, her brown eyes bright with unshed tears. I already do, and I am not going to stand here and watch you run away because you think you are protecting me. We face this together, or not at all. Cole wanted to argue, wanted to tell her all the reasons why she was wrong, why he was not worth fighting for. But the words would not come, because standing there in the fading afternoon light, looking at this woman who saw something in him that no one else ever had, he realized he did not want to run anymore. He wanted to stay. He wanted to fight. He wanted, for the first time in his life, to be the man Eleanor believed he could be. "All right," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "All right, we do this together, but we do it my way." That evening, Cole called a meeting at the saloon. He asked Eleanor to spread the word to the townspeople, and though many were hesitant, curiosity and concern for their schoolteacher brought them out. The saloon was packed, men and women crowded together, all eyes on Cole as he stood at the front of the room. He told them everything, about the Brennan gang, about his time riding with them, about why he had come to Salvation Creek. He told them about Jack's threat and about the choice he was facing. He laid his past bare before them, holding nothing back, and when he was finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Tommy Patterson's father stood up. He was a rancher, a hard man weathered by years of frontier life, and his opinion carried weight in the community. "Way I see it," he said slowly, "is that Cole here could have just ridden out without telling us anything. Could have left us to face those men without warning, but he did not. He came to us honest, and I respect that." "He is still an outlaw," someone called out from the back, "still wanted by the law." "For things he did years ago," Mrs. Patterson interjected, standing beside her husband. "I have watched him with my boy, seen the kind of man he is now. People change. Do we not believe in that? Is that not what we preach in church every Sunday?" The debate continued, voices rising and falling, opinions clashing. Eleanor stood beside Cole, her presence a steady anchor, as the town decided his fate. Finally, Sheriff Dalton, who had been silent until now, stood up and raised his hand for quiet. "I have been sheriff of this town for 30 years, he said, his voice carrying despite his age. "And in that time, I have seen all kinds of men. Some are born bad and stay bad. But some make mistakes when they are young and spend the rest of their lives trying to make up for it. Cole Hartley has been here for months now and has not caused a lick of trouble. He has worked hard, treated folks fair, and by all accounts, been a good neighbor. Now, the law might still want him for old crimes, but as far as I am concerned, he has paid his debt to this community. If he is asking for our help against men who would threaten our teacher and our children, then I say we give it to him." The sheriff's words seemed to settle something in the room. One by one, men began to volunteer to help. They were ranchers and shop owners, farmers and tradesmen, men who had spent the past months watching Cole change from a feared stranger into someone they recognized as one of their own. By the time the meeting ended, they had a plan. It was not complicated, but it did not need to be. When Jack Brennan and his men returned at sunrise, they would find Salvation Creek ready for them. Cole spent that night preparing, checking weapons, and going over the plan with the men who had volunteered to help. But as midnight approached, he found himself walking to the schoolhouse, knowing Eleanor would still be awake. She was sitting at her desk when he knocked, grading papers by lamplight. She looked up when he entered, and the smile that crossed her face made his chest ache. "Could not sleep?" she asked. "Too much on my mind," Cole admitted, taking a seat across from her. "Eleanor, about tomorrow." "Do not," she interrupted gently. "Do not say goodbye as if you are not coming back. We have a plan, and it is going to work." "But if it does not," Cole persisted, "if something goes wrong, I need you to know something." He reached across the desk and took her hand in his, marveling at how small it felt, how delicate. "You changed my life. You looked at me and saw something worth saving when everyone else, including me, had given up. You made me believe I could be better, could be the kind of man who deserves good things. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that. You saved me, Eleanor Brennan." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks, but she was smiling. "You saved yourself, Cole. I just reminded you of who you always were underneath all that pain. And tomorrow, we are going to finish what we started. We are going to build the life you deserve, the life we both deserve." Cole stood up, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. She came willingly, her head fitting perfectly under his chin. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the lamplight, neither of them speaking because there were no words for what passed between them. Finally, Cole pulled back just enough to look down at her. "I love you," he said, the words rough but sincere. "I know I have got no right to say it, and I know you deserve better than a broken-down outlaw, but it is the truth. I love you, Eleanor." Eleanor reached up and touched his face, her palm resting against the scar on his cheek. "I love you too," she whispered. "And you have every right to say it because you are not broken, Cole Hartley. You are the strongest man I have ever known. And when this is over, we are going to build a life together. You and me. That is a promise." Cole kissed her then, gentle and reverent, as if she were something precious that might break. Eleanor kissed him back with all the love and faith she had, pouring into that kiss everything she felt for this man who had been called mean by everyone until she called him gentle. When they finally parted, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I will come back to you," he promised. "No matter what happens, I will come back." "I know," Eleanor said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Sunrise came too quickly. Cole stood in the middle of the main street, alone, but not really alone. Hidden in the buildings around him were 15 men from the town, all armed and ready. Sheriff Dalton was in the saloon with his rifle. Tommy Patterson's father was in the general store. Mrs. Chen's husband, a former soldier, was positioned on the roof of the hotel. They were ordinary men, not gunslingers or soldiers, but they were defending their home, and that made them dangerous. Eleanor was in the schoolhouse with the other women and children, the doors barred and the windows shuttered. Cole had made her promise to stay there no matter what she heard, and though it had nearly killed her to agree, she had given her word. At 10 minutes past 6, Jack Brennan and his 2 men rode into town. They came slowly, confidently, 3 men who had faced down banks and posies and had never lost. Jack's eyes narrowed when he saw Cole standing alone in the street. "You come to take us up on our offer?" Jack called out, his hand resting casually on his gun. "I came to give you a message," Cole replied, his voice carrying in the still morning air. "You are not welcome here. You ride out now and do not come back, and we will forget this ever happened. You try to cause trouble, and you will regret it." Jack laughed, and his men joined in. "You in what army, Cole? You think you can take all 3 of us by yourself? You always were brave, but that is just stupidity." "He is not by himself," Sheriff Dalton called out, stepping into the doorway of the saloon with his rifle raised. "And he has got us too," Patterson added, appearing in the window of the general store. One by one, the men of Salvation Creek revealed themselves, a ring of armed defenders surrounding the 3 outlaws. Jack's laughter died, his expression turning ugly as he realized he had been outmaneuvered. "This is how it is going to be," he snarled at Cole. "You are going to hide behind these shopkeepers and farmers?" "I am going to stand with my friends," Cole corrected, "with people who believe in second chances and protecting their own. You have got a choice, Jack. You can ride out peacefully, or you can draw, and we will end this right here, right now. But I am telling you, even if you manage to take me down, you will not make it out of this town alive. Is that really what you want?" The standoff stretched out, tense and brittle. Cole could see Jack weighing his options, could see the moment when he realized that this was not a fight he could win. Jack's 2 companions were looking nervous, their horses shifting restlessly beneath them. Finally, Jack spat in the dust and yanked his horse's reins. "You are making a mistake, Cole. These people will not protect you forever. Someday your past will catch up with you, and when it does, do not expect any mercy from me." "I will take my chances," Cole said evenly. Jack and his men turned and rode out of town at a gallop, a cloud of dust marking their retreat. The men of Salvation Creek held their positions until the outlaws were completely out of sight, and then, slowly, they began to lower their weapons. Sheriff Dalton was the first to speak, walking over to Cole and clapping him on the shoulder. "That was well done, son. You stood your ground." "We all did," Cole said, looking around at the men who had risked themselves for him. "I cannot thank you enough." "No thanks needed," Patterson said, coming out of the general store. "You are one of us now. This is what we do for our own." The words hit Cole harder than any bullet could have. One of us. Our own. He had been running his entire life, never belonging anywhere, never having anyone to stand with him. And now, in this small town in the middle of nowhere, he had found something he had never thought possible. A home. Eleanor burst out of the schoolhouse, ignoring her own promise to stay inside, and ran across the street. Cole caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet and holding her tight. She was crying and laughing at the same time, and Cole found that his own eyes were suspiciously wet. "You came back," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I promised I would," Cole replied, setting her down but not letting go. "I always keep my promises to you. Around them, the town was coming back to life, people emerging from their hiding places, children running into the street. There was a celebratory atmosphere, a sense of shared triumph that bonded the community even closer together. Cole found himself shaking hands, receiving thanks and congratulations, being treated not as an outsider or a threat, but as a hero. But the best moment came later that afternoon when Sheriff Dalton pulled Cole aside and handed him an envelope. "This came in on the stage yesterday," the sheriff said. "I have been holding on to it, waiting for the right time to give it to you." Cole opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was an official-looking document bearing the seal of the territorial governor. He read it once, then twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. It was a pardon, a full pardon for all crimes committed while riding with the Brennan gang, granted on the condition that Cole Hartley maintain lawful behavior and contribute positively to his community. "How?" Cole asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sheriff Dalton smiled. "Your Miss Eleanor wrote to the governor 2 months ago. Told him about you, about how you had changed, about the work you had been doing here. She collected letters from folks in town, testimonials about your character. She even got Mrs. Patterson and some of the other ladies to sign a petition. The governor was impressed. Said if a whole town was willing to vouch for you, then maybe you deserved a second chance." Cole looked across the street to where Eleanor was standing with a group of children, helping them calm down from the morning's excitement. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up and met his eyes, and the love he saw there nearly broke him. "She never told me," he said. "She did not want to get your hopes up in case it did not work out," the sheriff explained. "But she fought for you, Cole. Fought harder than anyone I have ever seen. That woman loves you something fierce." Cole walked across the street in a daze, the pardon clutched in his hand. Eleanor saw him coming and said something to the children, who scattered to give them privacy. She stood waiting, her hands clasped in front of her, hope and fear mixing in her expression. "You wrote to the governor," Cole said, holding up the pardon. Eleanor nodded, her eyes searching his face. "I did. I could not stand the thought of you always looking over your shoulder, always afraid. I wanted you to be free, truly free to build whatever life you wanted. Are you angry?" Instead of answering with words, Cole dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the street. He took Eleanor's hand in his, looking up at her with his heart in his eyes. "Eleanor Brennan, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You saw me when I was invisible, believed in me when I had given up on myself, loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a future when I thought I had none. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you?" Eleanor was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Cole, I will marry you, and you do not have to be worthy of me. You already are. You always have been." Cole stood up and kissed her, right there in front of the whole town, and the cheer that went up from the gathered crowd was loud enough to shake the buildings. Children clapped, women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs, and men grinned and nudged each other, remembering what it was like to be young and in love. That night, there was a celebration at the saloon. Pete broke out his best whiskey, and someone brought a fiddle, and soon the whole town was dancing and singing. Cole and Eleanor were at the center of it all, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, both of them grinning like fools. "I never thought I would have this," Cole admitted as they swayed together to the music. "A real life, with people who care about me. A woman like you who loves me. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream," Eleanor assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "It is real, and it is yours, and no one can take it away from you. We are going to build a life together, Cole. A good life. I promise you that." "I know," Cole said, and for the first time in his life, he truly believed it. They were married 3 weeks later in a ceremony at the schoolhouse, with the whole town in attendance. Eleanor wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, and Cole wore a new suit that Mr. Wilson had made specially for the occasion. Sheriff Dalton officiated, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was sweet and full of promise. Cole had used the money he had saved from his carpentry work to buy a small piece of land on the edge of town, and with help from his new friends and neighbors, he began building them a house. It was not large or fancy, but it was solid and well made, with 2 bedrooms and a wide front porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. Eleanor planted flowers around the foundation, and by the time they moved in at the end of October, It felt like home. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Cole established himself as the town's carpenter and handyman, and his reputation for quality work spread to neighboring communities. He was busy from dawn until dusk most days, but he always made time to walk Eleanor home from the schoolhouse and to sit with her on their porch in the evenings, talking about their days and making plans for their future. Eleanor continued to teach, and now she had an even more devoted helper. Cole would stop by the schoolhouse during his lunch break and help the older students with their building projects, teaching them how to measure and cut wood, how to drive a nail straight, how to create something lasting with their own hands. The children adored him, and Cole discovered that he had a gift for teaching, for breaking down complicated tasks into simple steps that even the youngest students could understand. As autumn faded into winter, Eleanor began to suspect that she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Cole, choosing a quiet evening when they were alone by the fireplace. He was reading a newspaper, his feet propped up on a footstool, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "Cole," she said softly, setting down her knitting, "I have something to tell you." He looked up immediately, always attuned to the tone of her voice. "What is it? Is everything all right?" "Everything is wonderful," Eleanor assured him, moving to sit beside him. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We are going to have a baby. You are going to be a father." Cole stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and then pure joy. "A baby?" he repeated, as if testing the words. "You are sure?" "I am sure," Eleanor confirmed, laughing at his dazed expression. "Sometime in early June, if Dr. Mitchell's calculations are correct." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, as if she might break. "A baby," he said again, wonder in his voice. "I am going to be a father. Eleanor, I do not know if I know how to do that. What if I am no good at it?" "You will be wonderful," Eleanor said firmly. "You are patient and kind and gentle. You are everything a father should be. Our child is lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Cole corrected, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You gave me a life, Eleanor, a real life with meaning and purpose. Now you are giving me a family. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Eleanor whispered, "and we are going to be so happy. I can feel it." Winter gave way to spring, and Eleanor's stomach grew round with their child. Cole became even more protective, insisting she rest more, hovering whenever she had to lift anything heavier than a book. Eleanor found it both endearing and slightly exasperating, but she loved him too much to complain. The town rallied around them, as they had learned to do for their own. The women organized a quilting bee to make blankets for the baby. The men built a beautiful cradle that they presented to Cole and Eleanor at a Sunday gathering. Mrs. Patterson, who had 5 children of her own, became Eleanor's unofficial advisor on all things pregnancy-related, offering wisdom and reassurance when Eleanor was worried. On a warm evening in early June, Eleanor went into labor. Cole, who had faced down armed outlaws without flinching, turned pale and nearly passed out when her water broke. Dr. Mitchell had to physically push him out of the bedroom and tell him to wait in the main room with the other men who had gathered to offer support. It was a long night. Cole paced the floor while Patterson and Sheriff Dalton tried to distract him with conversation and whiskey. He could hear Eleanor's cries through the walls, and each one felt like a knife to his heart. He wanted to be with her, to hold her hand, but Mrs. Patterson had been very firm that the birthing room was no place for husbands. Finally, as the sun was beginning to rise, Cole heard a new sound, the thin, indignant wail of a newborn baby. His heart stopped and then kicked back into gear with such force that he thought it might burst. Dr. Mitchell emerged from the bedroom a few minutes later, tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Cole," he said. "You have a son, a healthy, strong boy with a good set of lungs on him, and Eleanor did beautifully. She is asking for you." Cole did not remember crossing the room. Suddenly he was just there, in the bedroom doorway, staring at the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. Eleanor was propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in one of the quilts the town ladies had made, was a tiny baby with a shock of dark hair and a red wrinkled face. "Come meet your son," Eleanor said softly, her eyes shining with love and joy. Cole approached slowly, carefully, as if walking through a dream. He sat on the edge of the bed, and Eleanor shifted the baby so Cole could see him better. The infant was asleep now, his tiny fists curled near his face, his chest rising and falling with each breath. "He is perfect," Cole whispered, afraid to speak too loudly. "Eleanor, he is perfect." "He looks like you," Eleanor observed, touching the baby's dark hair. "I think he is going to have your eyes, too." "Can I hold him?" Cole asked, his voice trembling slightly. Eleanor carefully transferred the baby to Cole's arms, and Cole cradled his son with a gentleness that belied his size and strength. The baby stirred, his eyes opening briefly to reveal a dark blue color that might turn gray with time. Father and son stared at each other, and Cole felt something shift in his chest, something huge and overwhelming. This was his child, his son, a tiny, helpless person who would depend on Cole to keep him safe, to teach him, to love him. The responsibility was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "What should we name him?" Eleanor asked, watching her husband with their newborn. Cole thought for a moment, then smiled. "What about James Samuel Hartley, after my grandfather, the only person in my family who was ever kind to me, and Samuel for your father." "James Samuel," Eleanor repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Welcome to the world, James Hartley. You are so loved already." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. Cole discovered that he was, much to his surprise, quite good with babies. He had a knack for soothing James when he cried, walking him around the house and humming old trail songs until the baby fell asleep. He changed diapers without complaint and rocked his son for hours, staring down at the tiny face with a wonder that never quite faded. Eleanor watched her husband with their child and fell even more in love with him. She saw how gentle he was, how patient, how completely devoted. This was the man the town had called mean, the outlaw everyone had feared. But she had known from the very beginning that underneath the hard exterior was someone capable of tremendous love. She had just needed to give him a chance to show it. As James grew, Cole's carpentry business continued to thrive. He hired 2 apprentices, young men from town who wanted to learn the trade, and together they built houses, barns, and furniture all across the county. Cole discovered that he enjoyed teaching, enjoyed passing on his skills to the next generation. He was fair but demanding, expecting excellence but offering patience and encouragement. Eleanor returned to teaching once James was old enough to be minded by Mrs. Patterson during the day. She loved her students and could not imagine giving up the work that brought her so much joy. Cole supported her completely, sharing in the child rearing and housework without complaint. They developed a routine that worked for them. Cole would start his workday early and come home for lunch, when he would take over caring for James while Eleanor prepared lessons for the afternoon. In the evenings, they would eat together as a family, and then Cole would play with James while Eleanor cleaned up. Bedtime was a joint effort, with Cole reading stories in his deep, rumbling voice while Eleanor sang lullabies. Life was not always easy. Money was sometimes tight, and there were illnesses and injuries and all the normal struggles of frontier life. But through it all, Cole and Eleanor had each other, and that made everything bearable. When James was 2 years old, Eleanor became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Eleanor's grandmother. Rose had her mother's brown eyes and her father's determination, and from the moment she could crawl, she was following her older brother everywhere. Cole was just as devoted to his daughter as he was to his son, maybe even more protective. He built her a dollhouse with furniture he carved by hand and spent hours playing tea party with her, his large, work-roughened hands holding tiny porcelain cups with surprising delicacy. Eleanor would sometimes find them in the workshop together, Rose sitting on Cole's lap while he showed her how to sand wood smooth, and her heart would swell with love for this man who had once thought he was unworthy of happiness. The years passed in a blur of school plays and Christmas pageants, of birthday parties and Sunday dinners with friends. Cole's reputation as an outlaw faded into distant memory, replaced by his reputation as one of Salvation Creek's most respected citizens. He served on the town council, helped organize the annual Harvest Festival, and was always the first person people called when there was work to be done or a problem to be solved. Eleanor's school grew, and eventually the town built a larger schoolhouse to accommodate all the children. Cole oversaw the construction personally, ensuring that his wife had the best possible space to teach in. The new schoolhouse had large windows for natural light, a pot-bellied stove that actually heated the whole room, and bookshelves lining the walls. Jack Brennan and his gang were captured by federal marshals 2 years after their encounter in Salvation Creek. They were tried and sentenced to long prison terms, and Cole felt a weight lift from his shoulders when he heard the news. That part of his life was truly over now, closed and finished. When James was 8 and Rose was 6, Eleanor gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Matthew and Clara. Their house, which had once seemed so spacious, suddenly felt much smaller, and Cole began planning an addition. With help from his apprentices and friends from town, he added 2 more bedrooms and expanded the kitchen. Life was full and chaotic and wonderful. There were always children underfoot, always noise and mess and laughter. Cole, who had spent so much of his life in silence and solitude, found that he loved the chaos. He loved coming home to a house full of life, to children who ran to greet him and wrapped their arms around his legs. He loved the way Eleanor would look up from whatever she was doing and smile at him, that special smile that was just for him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Eleanor with a trip. They left the children with Mrs. Patterson and her now grown daughters and took the train to Denver. It was Eleanor's first time leaving Salvation Creek since she had arrived over a decade earlier, and she was like a child herself, pressing her face to the train window and exclaiming over everything they passed. In Denver, they stayed in a real hotel with hot running water and electric lights. They ate in restaurants and attended a theatrical performance and walked through the city streets hand in hand like newlyweds. But the best part was the quiet evenings in their hotel room when they could simply be together without the responsibilities of children and work. "Are you happy?" Cole asked her one night as they lay in bed, Eleanor's head resting on his chest. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Eleanor replied, tracing lazy patterns on his skin. "Sometimes I think about that day I walked into the saloon and asked you to fix the school fence. What if I had been too afraid? What if I had listened to everyone who said you were dangerous? Then I would have ridden out of Salvation Creek eventually," Cole said, "and spent the rest of my life alone, never knowing what I was missing." "I am glad I was not afraid," Eleanor said softly. "I am glad I saw you for who you really were." "You made me into who I really was," Cole corrected. "I was not that man before you, Eleanor. You called me gentle when everyone else called me mean, and somehow I became what you said I was. You had faith in me when I had none in myself. I just reminded you of who you had always been," Eleanor insisted, tilting her head up to look at him. "The goodness was always there. Cole, you just needed someone to believe in it." They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that had only deepened over the years, and when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Cole thought that he must be the luckiest man who had ever lived. They returned to Salvation Creek refreshed and even more in love, if that were possible. Their children mobbed them at the train station, all talking at once about everything they had done while their parents were away. Cole scooped up the twins while James and Rose grabbed Eleanor's hands, and they walked home as a family, together and complete. The years continued to pass. James grew into a young man with his father's build and his mother's thoughtful nature. He apprenticed with Cole, showing a natural talent for carpentry, and everyone said he would take over the business someday. Rose became a teacher like her mother, taking a position in a nearby town but coming home every Sunday for dinner. Matthew showed an early interest in medicine and announced his intention to become a doctor, while Clara, the youngest and most spirited, declared she was going to be a writer and travel the world. Cole and Eleanor supported all their children's dreams, encouraging them to reach for whatever they wanted from life. They had built a family on love and faith and second chances, and they wanted their children to know that they could be anything, do anything, as long as they held on to those values. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the town threw Cole and Eleanor a party. It seemed like everyone in Salvation Creek and half the surrounding county showed up, filling the street with music and laughter and food. There were speeches about how much the couple had done for the community, about the lives they had touched and the example they had set. But the most moving moment came when Sheriff Dalton, now in his 90s and using a cane but still sharp as ever, stood up to speak. 20 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, a stranger rode into our town, and we judged him by his reputation instead of his character. We were afraid of him, hostile to him, ready to drive him away. But one woman, our Eleanor, she looked past the reputation and saw the man underneath. She gave him a chance when no one else would, believed in him when he did not believe in himself. And because of that faith, because of that love, our town gained one of its finest citizens. The sheriff turned to look at Cole, his old eyes misty. "You have been a good friend, Cole Hartley, a good neighbor, a good father, a good man. This town is better because you are in it, and I am proud to have known you." Cole had to wipe his eyes, and he was not the only one. Eleanor squeezed his hand, and when he looked at her, he saw tears streaming down her face as well. But they were happy tears, joyful tears, the kind that came from being surrounded by people you loved in a place you belonged. "I want to say something too," Cole said, standing up. The crowd quieted, everyone turning to listen. "When I came to Salvation Creek 20 years ago, I was running. Running from my past, from the law, from myself. I did not think I deserved happiness or peace or any of the good things life had to offer. I was angry and bitter, and so alone, I did not even realize how lonely I was." He looked at Eleanor, his eyes full of love. And then this woman, this incredible, stubborn, beautiful woman, decided I was worth saving. She saw something in me I could not see in myself. She called me gentle when everyone else called me mean, and somehow I became the man she believed I could be. She gave me love and a home and a family. She gave me a life worth living. Cole turned to address the crowd. "And this town, you all gave me a second chance. You could have run me out or turned me over to the law, but instead, you let me prove myself. You became my friends, my neighbors, my family. Every day I wake up grateful for the life I have here, for the people in it. I was lost, and you helped me find my way home." There was not a dry eye in the crowd by the time Cole finished speaking. People came up to shake his hand, to hug Eleanor, to tell them how much they had meant to the community. It was a celebration of love and redemption, of the power of second chances and the strength of community. As the evening wore on and the party continued, Cole and Eleanor slipped away for a few moments of quiet. They walked to the schoolhouse, the place where their story had really begun, and sat on the front steps looking up at the stars. "We built a good life," Eleanor said softly, leaning against Cole's shoulder. "We did," Cole agreed, wrapping his arm around her. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had made different choices when you were young?" Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret the things I did when I was riding with the gang," he said honestly. "I regret the people I hurt, the mistakes I made. But do I regret the path that led me here, to you, to our children, to this life? Never. Everything I went through made me into the man I am today. And that man gets to wake up every morning next to the woman he loves, in a town where he is respected, with children and friends and a future full of possibility. How could I regret that?" "You have changed so much," Eleanor mused. "But in other ways, you are exactly the same person I met that first day. Still quiet, still thoughtful, still gentle in ways that matter." "I am who you said I was," Cole said simply. "You called me gentle, and I tried every day to live up to that. You believed in me, and that belief changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside them, both was a deep contentment, the satisfaction of a life well lived and love well earned. Eventually, they returned to the party, where their children were waiting with cake and more speeches. As the night drew to a close and people began heading home, Cole and Eleanor walked back to their house hand in hand, their children following behind, tired and happy. The years continued their steady march forward. Cole's hair turned gray at the temples, and then silver all over. Eleanor developed laugh lines around her eyes and mouth, marks of a life filled with joy. Their children grew up and began families of their own. James married a girl from a neighboring town and took over Cole's carpentry business. Rose married a teacher and continued her work educating children. Matthew went to medical school in St. Louis and returned to Salvation Creek to set up a practice. Clara traveled to San Francisco and became a journalist, writing stories about the changing West. Cole and Eleanor became grandparents, and then grandparents many times over. Their house was always full of grandchildren, running and playing, just as it had once been full of their own children. Cole built toys and furniture for each new grandchild, putting the same care and love into each piece that he had into everything else he made. On quiet evenings, when it was just the two of them, Cole and Eleanor would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over Salvation Creek. They would hold hands and talk about their day, their children, their grandchildren, their memories. Sometimes they did not talk at all, simply sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from decades of knowing each other completely. Cole still marveled, even after all these years, at how his life had turned out. The angry, bitter young man who had ridden into town expecting nothing but trouble had found instead love, family, purpose, and peace. He had been transformed not by force or fear, but by one woman's stubborn faith in his better nature. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor asked one evening, noticing the contemplative look on his face. "About how lucky I am," Cole replied, squeezing her hand gently. "About how you saved me." "We saved each other," Eleanor corrected, as she always did when he said things like that. "I was alone too, you know. I had come all the way from Boston, leaving everything I knew behind. I was trying to prove something to myself and to my family, and then I met you, and suddenly I was not alone anymore. You gave me as much as I gave you, Cole. Never forget that." "I will never forget anything about you," Cole promised. "Every moment we have had together is precious to me." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Cole pulled Eleanor closer. She rested her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly against him, the way she had for over 30 years. They had faced so much together: uncertainty and fear, judgment and threats, the everyday struggles of building a life on the frontier. But they had also experienced joy beyond measure, the birth of their children, the growth of their family, the deep satisfaction of being part of a community, the comfort of a love that had only grown stronger with time. The town that had once called Cole mean had long since forgotten that name. To Salvation Creek, he was simply Cole Hartley, the carpenter, the father, the friend, the man who had proven that people could change, that redemption was possible, that love could transform even the most broken soul. And it had all started because one woman had looked at a stranger and seen not a threat, but a possibility. She had called him gentle when no one else would, had believed in him when he did not believe in himself, had loved him into becoming the man he was always meant to be. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Cole and Eleanor sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built, secure in the love they shared. They had taken a chance on each other all those years ago, and that chance had become the greatest blessing either of them had ever known. The cowboy had become the man she said he was, and in doing so had found not just redemption, but something far more valuable: a home, a family, and a love that would last all his days. And for Cole Hartley, the man who had once thought he deserved nothing, that was everything.